Well, welcome. I'm Carol Mickett, and this is our town, and Mr. Hank Hine, the director, is so generous to open this museum to a forum like this, where we get to explore people who have helped to shape St. Petersburg. This year, we've had two public servants. We've had our mayor, Rick Kreisman, and we've had former city council person Jeff Danner. And then we've had one private citizen, Beth Morian, and now we're having a second one. And one of the things I'm interested in this year is that play. What is the responsibility of the public sector, and what's the responsibility of the private sector, and what do they do? And I've been having the pleasure of talking with Mr. James, and I've been thinking about how to describe him. And the thing I keep coming up with is an elder. Well, I mean that in a complimentary sense. I mean, it is the case that Mr. James isn't a young person. I mean, he's not 20. But an elder is somebody who has gained wisdom through experience and life. And it's in that sense that I think of him as an elder. And that, to me, became transparent once I've been talking with you. One, I think you'll discover, and many of you know Mr. James, is that he's really smart. I mean, really smart. And he's also thoughtful. And those two together help to shape an elder. So I'm going to start with the first question I've always started with, and this is when he was a very young person, is how did you first come to St. Pete?
When my father left the Second World War, where he'd served in the Navy after he graduated from Harvard, he went to work for my mother's father, who was a patriarchal German in Ohio, who kind of gathered his family, and he had 4 kids, 3 daughters and a son, in a compound to live. And he was a building supply person, even though his education was as a lawyer, and he graduated from law school at 20. And he had a lumber yard, he had aggregate pits, he had stone quarries, he built roads, he built houses, he built all kinds of things to use all of this supply business that he started with. And my father and mother, my father had gone to Harvard, and he had met my mother, who went to Wellesley, who had the unique distinction of being one of 2 physics graduates from Wellesley College, and he was an English major, right? So he got out, and he actually, when he went to work for my grandfather, he built houses in Sandusky, where I was born, a suburb of Cleveland, for those of you that aren't familiar with the Cleveland area, and the home of Cedar Point that some of you may be aware of. But he didn't stay very long. He built homes there, and the 2 of them in their discussions decided, it really wasn't too much fun to live in a compound in a little town like Lima, Ohio, which was my grandfather's home. So my father's father had been an executive of Libby, McNeil and Libby in Chicago, a food distribution company and manufacturing company, and he'd had an early heart attack and retired to Florida. Some of us remember the days when the doctor's prime prescriptive was, go south, young man, go south if you've had a heart attack, and get well and rest. And so my grandfather came to Florida. So my father moved down here to Florida, and he knew how to build houses, so he became a home builder here in Florida. And he developed Pinellas Point, Bahama Shores, the north part of Lake Maggiore. He was a home builder, and later became involved in the securities business through a small investment with two brokers from Merrill Lynch who wanted to start their own firm, and he helped fund it with the grand sum of $10,000. And that's how he got involved in the securities business, and he went in partnership with them after he became more intrigued with that. So I actually got here at 3, and I was the only member of 4 kids that wasn't born here in St. Petersburg. So I actually feel like a child born in St. Petersburg, certainly raised almost all my life here. And that's how I got here. You know, you don't make a lot of decisions at 3.
So you went to school here, public school here,
I did.
high school.
Yeah.
And what do you most remember about what St. Petersburg was like when you grew up? What were the highlights and what were the things that weren't so great?
Well, to give you some perspective, St. Petersburg at the time I moved here was the same size as Lima, Ohio. Had about 47,000 people. Quite different now. Lima is still 47,000 people. And St. Petersburg's grown a lot. But what I remember about St. Petersburg was it was a beautiful place. The weather was great. I enjoyed the outdoors. I especially liked the water. I became a fisherman very young, and I loved to fish. I played baseball, I played basketball, I played tennis. And
and was this in high school?
I actually became a tennis player when I was 12. And I followed my then first girlfriend to a group lesson. And the pro then, some of you may remember Dan Sullivan, who developed a lot of the tennis players here in the St. Petersburg area, and he was running a group lesson. And he actually had a theory that if he could get kids out of other general sports and get them into tennis, he could make great tennis players.
And did he?
Well, he made me a good tennis player. I'm not sure I ever qualified as a great tennis player. But the fact is, after that day going there, and I'd been playing in Bartlett Park, playing sandlot football. And so I was a mess. And I had basketball shoes on and Levi's and looked like I was, probably been through a war. And he asked me to come out and hit tennis balls. I said, well, I don't have any tennis shoes. He said, that's okay. Come out here and hit some tennis balls. So, I played a lot of baseball. I could make contact with the ball. And he convinced me that I should become a tennis player that day. And almost from that day forward, I played tennis every day. And so
So what was it about tennis that you liked so much?
Well, it's even though I played a lot of team sports and kept playing them later, tennis, really you're only dependent on yourself. And eye-hand coordination was very important. I wouldn't have said it that way then, but I was good at those kind of games from baseball. And it was an opportunity to get very good at something if you worked at it. So, I probably played 3 or 4 hours every day after school and then played 6, 8 hours on Saturday and Sunday. And so I got to be a state highly ranked junior within 8 months of starting and stayed highly ranked all the way through high school graduation. And I played on a St. Petersburg team that was number 1 in the state at St. Pete High. And then I went away to Harvard and played tennis and squash at Harvard. So
is that, you think, a metaphor for your life? That this sport where if you work hard, you can excel individually?
Well, I certainly share a great respect for hard work. I always thought I was pretty smart, but my greatest strength was I was really determined. So that if I worked hard at things, I could get good at them. And I did that with tennis, and I did that as a scholar, even though if you'd have seen me in Southside Junior High, when I'd wear my motorcycle jacket to school, and I wore a waterfall. Some of you remember what a waterfall was? And I then became a rock and roll musician. And I still, graduated at the top of my class all the way through school. So, because I wanted to. That's really what, it was a competitive goal.
Is there anything that you ever worked real hard at that you didn't succeed at?
Oh, heavens. Yeah, I mean, they're looking back at my life. I certainly didn't reach my goals in tennis. I reached my goals in school, I would tell you. I did fine all the way through business school and college, after college, and law school. But I would say I never got to be a great tennis player. I got to be a really good musician, actually, and a pretty good singer. And I was a better band manager even, so by the time I left college, I had 7 bands working for me. And, that's all timing.
Yeah.
When you're in the early 60s, there weren't any rock and roll bands at Harvard. So that's a great opportunity, And the only reason I know anything about rock and roll is I went downtown to the movie theater and watched Elvis Presley in 1956. And I said, this is not a bad gig. You go down here and the girls scream while you're up there playing. And I promptly went out and bought a guitar.
Huh. So here was a market that no one was cornering, and there you go.
And I did that at Harvard. Yeah, no, it was good. I made records. I did everything. I had a folk singing group and a rock and roll group. I had 4 rock and roll groups.
What was the name of what you were in?
It's called The Maniacs, which was quite appropriate.
And did lots of female students flock after you?
I have to say that the formula that I witnessed that afternoon in St. Petersburg did indeed work.
Yeah.
And you do find groupies.
So why did you give that up? Why didn't you continue in the music? I mean, it's a lucrative business.
If there's nothing else about me, I'm fairly practical.
Yeah.
And there wasn't a lot of money in music. There wasn't a lot of money in tennis then. I mean, it's not like today where, you can earn multi-million dollars as a top tennis player, and as a rock musician, you can make a lot of money. And I made an assessment that I was a good entertainer, but I wasn't a great singer. I wasn't blessed with a wonderful singing ability. I questioned that 10 years later when I looked back at all the people that were making a lot of money as rock and roll musicians, and I said, gee, they're not that good either. I could really have done this, I think. But the fact is I stayed pretty dedicated to get a good education and prepare myself for joining the world of business.
So back to this issue of education, which you keep mentioning, how important was your education here in St. Pete in the public schools in terms of shaping you to be ready to go to Harvard and succeed the way you have?
Well, I would say that I had some teachers, especially in high school. I had one in 5th grade who also was a very good tennis player named Pat Harkey, and played into her 90s. But she and a couple of the other elementary schools teachers really challenged me. And they got me interested in mathematics, and they got me interested in sciences. And so I thought learning was fun, actually. And my mother taught me to read when I was 3. So I'd read all the Hardy Boy books by the time I was 6. And so school wasn't as hard for me. I could read fast. I was really interested in it, and I was willing to study some. I didn't have to study very hard, but I was willing to study some. And so I thought it was fun. I guess I would tell you, I didn't really recognize in elementary school that somehow I had to have all this good base in education so that I could go on and be a success. It's just And I got very competitive with the other top students. And so I would just tell you, I always thought it was very important to being successful, and it opened up all kinds of opportunities for you all your life.
So do you think that your finding school fun was a result of who you were and how your parents engaged, or was it something about the way the schools were? Because if things are fun, we do them, and we do them happily, and we like to do them a lot. So, so was it you? Was it the school?
Well, you know, nothing is quite as simple as choosing one alternative like that. It's the all of the above, D.
The all of the above.
You know, yeah. I mean, all of that stuff. My parents were obviously well educated. They were smart. My mother was a classical pianist and a very good golfer. And my father worked hard and was a successful business person. So I saw the hours that you worked to be successful. He worked almost every weekend. So
so you were very fortunate.
Yeah, I was fortunate, and I had good genes, and you know, maybe I could choose my parents. I don't know, but whatever, it worked out fine, and so certainly that shaped me. But could I have been shaken if I had a bad experience in elementary school or junior high? Or St. Peter High School, sure. And I would tell you, I had teachers that I respected all the way through, not all of them, but a number of them, that I thought, actually, my chemistry teacher, my math teacher, the person who taught me history, even though I never took another history course until I got out of college, they really impacted me. And it really helped me I think, develop and have respect for education and enjoy education. So it really is all the above. I mean, it's not one factor.
So, I mean, that's the challenge that we all have, is how do you create that for when certain elements aren't there? Like if you don't have parents who have that enthusiasm and are well educated, or you don't have a school that has a great teacher, or you aren't motivated in that way, how do you create at least some of those to allow success?
Well, so
do you have some ideas about that?
I've always stayed involved in education ever since I got back here, and what I would say is I've had the good fortune to have opportunities to help shape things, and I was on the Pinellas County Education Foundation board when I was, 30. I was on the St. Petersburg Symphony board when I was 27. I became the head of the Florida Council on Economic Education, and I stayed involved in all kinds of alumni activities at Harvard. And as a result of that, I was always interested in education, and and I'm especially interested in helping people who don't have the means to get a good education. And I don't just mean economic means. I mean, the stable family life that I benefited from. So, I've been very engaged in the Chichi Rodriguez Foundation and helped redo the tennis courts at Bartlett Park.
What that is?
The Chichi Rodriguez Foundation.
There's some people
it's a partnership between the school board and Pinellas County. It's on McMullen Booth Road, and it has a golf course, but it also has a school that teaches kids from 4th to 8th grade who are falling behind in school and actually somewhat become inhibitions to being able to teach those that aren't similarly challenged. And they designate those students, and we take them to our school, and they supply the teachers. We built the buildings and built the facilities there to support the school. And we have about 100 and a few odd students there from 4th to 8th grade. And our goal is, by the time we get to 8th grade, to get them ready to re-enter school. And I can tell you that the class that just graduated from high school here, we in those days we only had 30 students, not 100 and some, and we've expanded the school over time. But 8 out of those 9 kids graduated from high school, and several of them are going to college, and other ones are going to have trade capability.
What did you do there that allowed that to happen?
Well, we made that joint venture. My father and Chichi Rodriguez had established that school originally, and it had kind of gone downhill.
Could you say who Chichi Rodriguez is?
He's an ex-professional golfer. In the mid-'70s, that happened to be a caddy at his club in Puerto Rico, where he came from very poor, humble beginnings, and became very invested in the idea that he wanted to help kids achieve the way he achieved. And so my father and he were kind of natural in doing that, and Chi-Chi had a lot of friends with a lot of money, and they raised a lot of money to build that school originally. My father kind of took care of it when Chi-Chi was going off on the tour and doing things. And one of our salespeople, who had been a high school teacher and a golf pro, interesting combination, ran that facility for a number of years. And it had kind of gone downhill, and Chi-Chi actually came to me about 10 years ago and said, "Tom, my friends, I don't have all these friends with private planes flying in that can give money to play around the golf and support the school for the year. We need to get local people to support it, and we need to get more professional management than Bill to run this operation." And so I took it over and got a lot of people from Tampa, Clearwater, and St. Petersburg, and even further around the state to join the board. And they're very engaged in running all kinds of activities to help raise money to make that school successful. And, we're very proud of the fact we take these kids that come from usually single-family homes that don't have much support and prepare them to go back to school. So Tom's out here. Frank Chivas is on the board of that operation and has been a very generous leader in terms of getting things done on the campus. He can build about anything.
Is he here?
He's not here. Frank's not here. But it's Tom Pritchard's partner.
Tom Pritchard here in the second row.
And he's an amazing guy, I would tell you. We convinced the city of Clearwater that this was a benefit to have us run this course, because usually cities lose money on their local courses, and we basically have a retired population that plays at this club. And I would tell you, it's a great golf course. It's in real good shape for a public course. And we took over the driving range across the street. We put in a paintball facility there and jungle gyms and all kinds of other activities so that we could keep people occupied after school. My firm donated all kinds of computers so that they teach computers, and everybody has access to PCs and iPads so that they can get educated in the modern methods. But the most important thing I would tell you is we took those kids who had no hope, who couldn't catch up, and they did, they felt like they were outsiders in their own schools. All of a sudden got renewed hope when they came to this school, which was populated by one teacher for every 9 students, so that we could give more attention to these young kids and get them qualified. And then we taught them everything about golf. And we taught them about how you run a golf course. And we taught them about what you buy and that you sell things. So we gave them economic training. We taught them about agronomy. It was it's a great facility, and we have a partnership with Boys and Girls Club now, which is more recent, where they come in and help supervise the kids after school. So it's been a great success, and I did the same thing with Jim Courier at the old St. Petersburg, the old Bartlett Park Tennis Club, which is now the St. Pete Tennis Center. And we did that with we have first tee at the school for the summer up at McMullen Booth, and we had First Serve here, which teaches values and ethics, and we taught all the surrounding kids and got them off the streets so that they could learn how to play tennis, and hopefully learn some values that we could train them. And so, I think that's an important part of life.
Mm-hmm. So this is what's interesting, is that here's a private citizen, a member of our town, with a bunch of other members of our town, who get together with their time, their smarts, their money, their energy, and shape these things for other people, not for themselves, not for their family. And some people could say, oh, that's very nice. Right, we're doing good, we're being responsible, we're giving back. So we've talked about this before. So my question is, why do that? I mean, why really make that effort to do the sorts of things that Tom has described? Why should we all, as Tom would like us all, to participate in this way? Why should we? So, Mr. James, could you provide me with this justification?
Well, the first time I got posed with that question in a little bit different form was in business school, when we had a case that presented the traditional business logic that your sole responsibility as a corporation was to your shareholders, and you needed to work to maximize returns for your shareholders all the time. And the other side of the coin was, there are all kinds of other things that the corporation can do. It's an entity, it's a group of people, essentially a family of people, is the way I like to refer to it at our firm, that they're not so narrow as to not have any interest outside of just working all day, and to feel good about themselves, to really express themselves and do the things in life that will make them feel fulfilled, that we need to do more. So we need to become a part of our community, and the way we did that when we started at Raymond James was we couldn't even afford to give enough money to make a whole lot of difference to a lot of charities when we started. We started with $20,000. So in 1962. And I was on the board then, by the way, while I was still in college, which my father found was a violation of Florida law because I wasn't 21 yet. So he fired me for 6 months until I got to be 21 and brought me back. This was part of his grand design that I only figured out later to get me back to the company. But the fact was that we wanted to participate. And so we set up a profit-sharing plan for our employees so they could participate in the success of the firm right off. We also joined the United Way. And our rationale was practical and value-driven. It was value-driven in the sense we could give back to the community even though we didn't have a lot of money ourselves, and we could get employees to contribute. And we started a tradition, which we still follow, of matching the contributions of our employees to the United Way. And that way, the practical answer was, I didn't have time to meet with all these charities who wanted money. I had to work all the time. And so this way, the United Way decided who were the 45 agencies that ought to receive money. And we could help more than one or two charities. We could participate in helping a lot of charities. Now, unfortunately, it got more complicated over time, like life always does. And pretty soon we were making enough money that we give a percentage of profits to charitable activities. And so now we have about 400 charities as recipients of our gifts above and beyond our matching program for the United Way. And the prime test is whether we have an individual involved in the charity, on the board, working on fundraising events, doing things like that. And if they want to do that and they have a fundraiser, we will donate money to that. And we do that in all 50 states of the United States now. And because we have employees in all those places. And that's been very successful, and I can tell you, we have grown a tradition of involvement. So when Habitat comes up, we don't have any difficulty getting 100 of our employees to volunteer and go build a house. And we certainly don't have any problem donating money to buy materials and do things like that. But we do that for every hospital, every major charity in the Tampa Bay area, and it seems like I attended dinner every night of the week for one charity or another. And you know, everybody's got auctions now. See, so you go buy something in the auction. So not only does the firm pay to get a table, but I get there and I have to contribute money personally to buy items in the auction, and then I never have time to use any of this stuff.
Well, then you can contribute them to other auctions.
I've done that. I have done that. But what I would tell you is that engendered the interest in our employees to really get involved in the community and do all these activities. We adopt schools here, Meadow Lawn Elementary. We were the first, you know, when Rick Baker was mayor, he had this program to get corporations. Well, he borrowed that from the Florida Council of 100 program, which we initiated in the Tampa Bay area with Meadow Lawn Elementary. And we took it from a C to an A school. And this is a highly mobile school with a difficult economic environment and social environment. And after we trained the principal to run a business, which is what a school is, which they don't have any training in. And she got hired as the assistant superintendent of the Pinellas County school system. And it took about 8 years, but the school went back downhill and we had to take it over again. So we're back running the school again. I say running the school. We're not running the school. We have plenty of teaching staff and other staff at the school. But what we do is we have 52 mentors who go to the school every week. And they create a relationship with one of the students who's having problems and spend a lot of time with them. And then we train the principal. We donate money so that there are meals at the PTA meetings so parents come to the PTA meetings. Works, let me tell you. And we give teachers money they can spend on a discretionary basis to be able to add to the education experience in their classrooms. Those of you that have taught know there's never enough money to do that. And so we make a difference at the school is what I would say. So
what is the benefit of doing that?
Well, this great conflict issue was, I argued on the other side, so I made a decision very quickly, which said having a corporation and corporate goals is not as simple as just saying in the short run all we do is maximize profits. You have to create this organizational value system and culture that supports success, attracts the right kind of people to your firm, and enables you to build something. And the only way you can do that is have an infrastructure where you live and work and be able to support people there, make sure you have a good education system, make sure you got entertainment value. I mean, you look around our community, you can't go to all the things that are going on every night. I mean, it's impossible. And that's not the way early St. Petersburg was.
But it's good that it's getting that way.
So what I would tell you is, you know, we had to build something called Raymond James University early in our lives because we couldn't find anybody with brokerage experience in St. Petersburg. Only Bill Huff down the street with all these great municipal people. And fortunately, Bill was one of my role models in being involved in your community, too. So what I would say is that we made this effort to really get involved, and you know, all this is documented. It's approved by the board. We have all the methodologies, and I convinced everybody that we should be doing this. And we're not the only one. I mean, even Goldman Sachs, who gets a lot of comments about their culture and value system, actually does all this too, and they gave away $156 million last year. And we gave a lot of money away, but not $156 million. They're a little bigger than we are. So what I would tell you is that I argued that you needed to have these attributes in your community. You needed to have good civic organizations and institutions that were strong, that supported these activities. And if you did that, you could attract all those good people. You could make people feel better about themselves, and you could build a much better corporation. And
and a much better community.
A much better community.
Much better government. Much better everything.
Yeah, we got a lot of management talent at our place. I mean, we have 550 MBAs in our headquarters building. I mean, we have a lot of people. They can help a lot of things. So if Hank's having a problem, the IT problem, we can send down one of our people from IT. I only have 1,290 of those. I can send one of those down here to help Hank. Organize something, a point of sale, analyze things for him so that he can make the right decisions. And we do that all over the place. I mean, it's just part of the culture now.
And that's what's so important, what you've just said, is that in order to keep making our town better and better, to support the talent we have here, to bring in more talent, we have to create great education, we have to create wonderful arts, we have to create jobs, we have to create good infrastructure, public transportation. We have to have all of these things to get the people we need to really flourish in the 21st century.
So today, I don't have to train them all in-house. I hire about half the people from the major financial centers in the United States. I still train a lot of people because I have always hired from the best schools all over the country. I always say, well, I didn't know the wealthy people in Tampa, so I couldn't hire their kids. So I went back to where I went to school and hired smart people. And lo and behold, you find out smart people, if you let them loose, they make things happen. And the reason we've been successful and been here and chosen never to sell and remained independent, unlike many of the institutions in the financial services industry in this area, is that we thought it was the right decision. It was a practical thing. And, I can hold my head up and say I made the right decision every time I turned down that offer from the next potential buyer, because we compounded the company at 18% a year, which means that from 1962 when we started, or 1983 when we went public, that we have taken the company and grown it compounded at 18%, and we've gone from that $20,000 initial investment to a net worth of $3.9 billion and revenues of $5 billion. So I couldn't have done that without the culture. I don't want any congratulations. I got plenty of congratulations. I'm self-satisfied. Now all my friends call me and say, "Can you hire my child for an intern job this summer?" It's and I've been doing that for a long time. I always told our peer group in the securities business, I said, if you want your son or daughter to get experience working in the securities business, I'll hire them in the summer, and they can come work for me. And I've hired a number of them like that, knowing full well they're going to hire them themselves when they graduate from college or business school. And, but I think I'm making a worthwhile investment.
So I would be remiss, given that we're in the Dalí Museum, if I didn't ask you why you think the arts are so important to a community.
That's a more complex question because I really didn't study the arts. I never studied music. I taught myself music. I taught myself my love for art. But I always enjoyed the music. Like my mother played classical piano, so I'd listen to that and I'd walk around humming Beethoven's Fifth. It's easy to hum. It's the only reason I can do that. But the fact is, I I had a neighbor in Driftwood where in my later years, I grew up. In Driftwood, yeah. Little Bayou. Yeah. And the individual across the street had been head of the art department at the University of Havana and had left Cuba when Castro came, and I'd go watch him paint. My mother painted a little bit, and I'd watch her paint. And she liked other artists, so I'd walk around with them at Mainsail or whatever they were doing. When I got back to here, we started doing our own art shows in our own parking lot, and we always had demonstrations until I figured out I was getting 4,000 people for a weekend, and for, at first, for $25,000 a year sponsorship, I could become the named sponsor of Gasparilla Art Festival. Sounded like a better business decision to me. So now we give them 300 volunteers, and we donate money to that event, and it works out very well. And I've started buying art when I was in college after I had all these ill-begotten gains as a rock and roll musician. I would go out with my now wife, and we would go to all the college art departments, the Graphic Arts Studio at MIT, the Wellesley Art Department, the Harvard Art Department, Cambridge Art Association, Concord Art Association, up on the North coastline to Rockport, down to the Cape, and I would buy art that reminded me of New England, just like many people who travel around. They find something they like that reminds them of the place, and they buy it, and that's how I started. And paintings were $200, $300. They didn't cost a lot of money, but my wife said that's where I caught the disease, though. It just took a long time for it to gestate.
So do you think that having arts in a community make it a better place?
Oh, yeah. Look, as I said to begin with, people aren't really simple. And if I could tell you story after story about people who could cared less about art, who, over time, having the art in the building, which they're in all the time, they bring people in to see the art on weekends. Whenever my wife wants to move a painting out of the office to take it home, they say, "You can't move my painting."
Yeah.
And see, Hazel's shaking her head. Yes, that's what happens. And and they come to love it. And there's so many great stories about the lessons of some of the art that people begin to see that they really didn't appreciate to begin with, that really changes their art appreciation. And, art teaches you, just like music teaches you, and life teaches you in general. And as I said, people are just too complex to be satisfied by working 14 hours a day. That's not what life is all about. It's much more complex than that. So
you have this incredible, large art collection in your where you work.
Yeah.
But you also you're the chair of the trustees of the Dalí Museum, of this museum. So you clearly make an effort to support institutions, art institutions, as well as your individual collection. So I take it that you value museums in a community.
Well, after I started traveling at work, everywhere I went to museums and galleries. And I carried this habit that I developed in college of buying paintings from places I visited everywhere I went. And I would go and try to learn about the good artists in the area, and I'd try to buy one piece while I was there, as long as I was there for longer than a day or two, and then I had some time to do that. And I always enjoyed that. And again, I didn't spend a lot of money starting out doing that. So, it's been great fun. And it's more than just appreciating the painting you buy. You get to know the gallery owners, you get to know the people who run the museums, you get to know the artists. I know probably 80% of the artists personally that I collect, which is probably in the 1,000 or 1,200 range, number of artists that I know. Can't remember all their names anymore. Alzheimer's is a sign of aging. So if I have wisdom, I forgot some of it.
So, given all that you've done, and given that I have now dubbed you the elder,
First time I've ever been called an elder, actually. I really appreciate this. This is important to somebody who appreciates Native American life.
yeah, I mean, really. Well, I am part Native American, so elders are important. We meet
They are,
them, and
absolutely
we
they are.
respect them, and we look for them for...
Next time I'll bring my talking stick.
They're okay. We look to them for vision. So, what do you see as your vision for St. Petersburg and the greater Tampa Bay area? I mean, this is something you've spent a lot of time thinking about and working on. So, what do you see as the direction that you think our city should go in, and what would you think would be if you had to prioritize, what would be the main thing you think that is important for us to gravitate towards?
Well, I always look at the process, the system, first, before even I decide what the objectives ought to be and those kinds of things. And, so what you need, like you need in a good corporation, is a great leader and leadership team. And so you got to have very high quality people in these roles. And we who are out in the world toiling every day, making a living, often don't spend enough time thinking about that, and we certainly don't want to do it ourselves because we're so engrossed in what we're doing. And so it's very important that we do take some time out to get the right people selected, and then to help them get done what they need to get done. And I was always, we've had a great group of mayors long-term here that I think helped shape the community. We've also had some that I thought were also rants. But, that's what makes the world go round. But some of those early, we have Bob Ulrich on the board of the museum here, and he certainly was a good mayor. I worked very closely with Rick Baker when he was mayor here, and he was an activist. He got a lot done. And you and I discussed that a little bit. And that's part of the kind of people you need to transform cities. You need people who have vision for what they want the city to become, and then they actually go do things to make it happen. And sure, I'm fortunate so I can give money to things. Bill Huff has been fortunate so he can give money to things, and so we could create some of the cultural activities and support those and have them work, because orchestras don't do too well on their own. So neither do opera companies. So, the Dalí Museum does a little better. But what I would say is that you need to get involved in those things and spend some of your time doing them, and it's actually quite fulfilling to do those things. And I always say it's more fun to give money away when you're alive than when you're dead. So, if you're fortunate enough to accumulate anything, you ought to give some of it away when people say thank you. Sometimes they don't still, but at least it's more fun to do that. So
because you get invited to dinner.
Yeah. Amazing young girls that work in the development areas of all these charities that pay a lot of attention to you when you go to those dinners. Part of the process. But I just think all that's important. I think sports are important, and I happen to be one of the school that likes the Tropicana just fine, but I want to keep baseball in Tampa Bay area if we can support it. Now, when you have issues like that, you have to ask some very hard questions. Is the problem that we have too many professional teams for the size of our community? because it's very hard to support 3 professional teams. As a matter of fact, you can't find another area the size of Tampa Bay that supports 3. So it's too many games to go to. So, you know, you have to ask, can I keep it going? Well, you know, I'm willing to buy a box and support the, you know, advertising the Tropicana and do things to help the team. And I do the same thing for the Bucks, and I do the same thing for the Lightning. I hate to see Jeff Finnick use all his own money doing the Lightning. It's, you know, so business has to do this. And the problem today, one of our problems in this community and many communities around the country, is we don't have enough of the headquarters. Because what happens is, even in my firm, I allocate these gifts sort of by demographics. You have to have that employee who gets involved in the local charity, and you give money there. I limit the amount that national charities get total. So, you know, otherwise I'd run out of money quickly. And we want to make sure that, you know, all kinds of charities get support. So but the teams are important too. I mean, they you know, if they give everybody, you listen to some of those people on the radio talk shows. Oh, yeah. I mean, they get so into this. It's like, I wish the employees would get that much into doing their jobs. Yeah. I mean, it's fantastic. Sometimes they're a little unreasonable about what they expect. You know, they have good athletes on all the teams. You know, you're not going to win them all. Right. But it seems like some of those fans think you should or would. And but, you know, most of us don't think that. But it's still fun to do that. Now, you know, I probably only go to 8 games a year of baseball. But the only reason is I don't have time. Right. And, you know, I'm going to too many charity events. So I still like to go to a movie once in a while, and I went to Ghost last night at Strauss Theater. I gave it a little higher rating than the paper, by the way. You want my critical evaluation, I would give it a B. They actually had some pretty good young talent in the show. Was the show as good as Patrick's movie? No. But was it enjoyable? Did people stand and clap at the end of the show? Did you enjoy the music? Yeah. So wasn't an evening badly spent. Even though when I got home and had to read some things for today's budget reviews, you know, it was 11 o'clock when I started reading all that stuff. And besides that, you have to put up with the traffic on the Howard Franklin. So, you know, I had to contain myself and not say Frankenstein. Right?
So I'm going to open it up for questions, because I'm sure people have questions for Mr. James. And yes, will you please, we have a microphone. Who has the microphone? It's up here.
Can you hear me okay?
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, could you please state your name?
Sure, it's Mike McNally, Mr. James. The question is, I'm a copperhead, but just recently. But when the transitions hadn't become the Valspar, and it was within hours of Puerto Rico taking that date, it seemed to me, just from the demographics of the audience you'd want to reach, that being a title sponsor of a PGA tournament would be a good fit. And did that ever come up, and how did you decide that we'll pass and Valspar stepped in? Did you think about taking over the PGA Tour stop at Innisbrook?
Could you explain that question?
Yeah, well, what he just said is,
and,
you know, we've had a golf tournament for a long time at Innisbrook, and the golf tournament has had difficulty securing a more permanent type sponsor, and work with our volunteers who work in his organization to support the tournament. And we are one of those that provides money to the tournament. And we entertain clients there, and we're involved with it. So did your compatriots in the group know enough to approach us and ask if we would put money into the tournament and sponsor it? Yes, numerous times. And
Did it seem like a good demographic marketing fit, marriage?
Well, you are bound by practical costs of marketing and branding, okay? And what I would tell you is, when we did the stadium, we actually had a specific purpose. we were merging all of our individual broker-dealers into one named Raymond James, and we wanted to have an umbrella branding icon, so to speak, and we did that by naming the stadium. And we negotiated an outstanding deal to do that. And there were many firms actually involved in that, but they didn't bid what we bid. So we got that. And by having that as a major cost of our general branding and marketing effort, which has repercussions outside our area, we did that. We do the French Open in the United States on NBC. So we had tennis involved in what we were doing, but we did look at the tournament. We did make a bid, and they got a better offer from Valspar. So was it not going to happen? That would have had to be a decision of the PGA. I can't really tell you whether they would have taken our offer. It was a lot better offer than they had for the prior year when they only had a presenting sponsor, and it had a escalation provision like we do at the stadium that increases our payment every year. So I would tell you we tried to help with that. We sponsored the seniors tournament at Outback. We sponsored this tournament, and we do national advertising on other tournaments already. Golf audiences are good audiences for our type clients, and so it's something that we certainly look very hard at and spend a lot of time with those in your group, like Larry Morgan, trying to determine what we could do, and I think we made a good offer, and they may have taken it if Valspar hadn't shown up.
Thank you.
There's a question up here, please.
Hi, thank you. Good evening. Nice to have you here. My name is Ann Drake McMullen. I work at Doyle Wealth Management. I'm going to ask you a question that Bob Doyle would say he's afraid to answer. Do you have a magic crystal ball? He's very reluctant to have crystal balls.
Well, I don't have a crystal ball.
Well, I'm going to ask you
I'm going to interrupt first and
Yes.
just say that your company
Yes.
is the sponsor of our town. So
Ah.
I would like to thank you for doing
Thank you very
that.
much. Bob Doyle. So when you moved here at age 3, St. Petersburg looked very different than it does today. Could you suggest what were the transformative issues or infrastructure that were responsible for today, what we see today? And can you use that and create that crystal ball? What will we see in 50 years or 100 years? What will be the issues and the infrastructure that will transform us for the next 100 years?
Well, what I would tell you clearly, the advantage that we had were the obvious ones that made Florida a great center of tourism. And so we had great weather. We had relatively low costs to California, for example, and certainly northeast and eastern financial centers and manufacturing centers, et cetera. So it had natural attraction to bring people here. And it took a while for it to build the infrastructure, the school systems, those kinds of activities, and enough, it's like the snowball. You've got to have some companies start, and pretty soon you spawn additional support companies, you spawn competitors, and you build an environment. Lima couldn't do that. Lima, as a matter of fact, outside of Columbus, it's very hard in Ohio to have real growth happening year to year. So we have a great advantage that helps us do that, I would say. And it creates its own set of problems, like the Howard Frankenstein. But the fact is that we need to work on those problems. So when we talk about things like Greenlight, it's true that none of us want to pay more in taxes. But you carry that to its logical extreme. You don't have any central administrative bodies at all that are helping do any of these things that need to get done to build infrastructure. And what I would say is the tax really is not 1 cent net on dollar sales because they're eliminating some other taxes. But somewhere we've got to start and build a public transportation system that not only works better in our own community. I guess low-income people that have the talent to work at our firm have difficulty if they can't afford cars to get to our office buildings at Carillon. And if we had a better bus system with more routes, and then when you think about Tampa, if we had a way to get to the airport and we had a way to get to downtown Tampa, we could limit some of the traffic snarls we have. But that doesn't mean it's without risk, because we got to do the same thing in Tampa, and we've got to then do it on a statewide basis. And we know there's a lot of talk now about Miami to Orlando and Orlando to Jacksonville. Well, let me tell you something. If we don't prepare the Tampa Bay area, it's not going to be part of that. And for me, that would be a real mistake, because every time we try to build the road system, seems to me we've been building 275 and I-4 for forever. And even Almerton Road forever. And I mean, you know, it's hard to keep up with all this. And so I think sometimes you got to take a risk and you got to go do things like that. And, you know, when our team from the Dalí went to the TDC to argue that they should give us some money to support this, unfortunately, we also don't have the board of directors of MoMA and the Met. So we couldn't raise the money around the table. So we were going to stretch our group and their friends and the local business leaders with private donations, so we needed some extra money. And we convinced the TDC that investing in the Dalí...
Can you say what the TDC is?
Yeah, the Tourist Development Commission, I think is the name, which gets the benefit of room taxes. And the fact is, you know, if you ran the numbers, if they donated money, which they did, to this development, they could get their money back in increased room taxes in 2 years. That's a better expenditure than running ads on television to come to the beaches. Because those people at the beaches, a lot of them come to see the Dalí Museum. We are a great endpoint for foreign tourists. And if you don't believe that, see what happens when it rains. Do not come down here to go to the Dalí in the rain. Because everybody who's at the beach to go to the beach has got to go somewhere else. So they're coming down to the Dalí. They're going to downtown St. Petersburg. They're not going to, you know, stay in their room all day. And so you can't get in on those kind of days. And those are our biggest attendance. May not seem immediately obvious that might be the result, but it's true. So all of our team, you know, Bill, Bob, the mayor helped us. Bill helped us with that. If Rick had been mayor, or our current mayor would have been mayor, they would have helped us too. They're good people. And our board worked very hard with those people. We convinced them to give the money, and they made a good decision. And that's not real easy, because they've got a lot of demands. And the people who created the TDC were the motels that wanted to have all the money spent on advertising, so they didn't have to do it. Oh, self-interest. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's a good thing. As long as you know what's happening. And so all I would say is we have that great opportunity here. We've got a lot of good businesses now in the Tampa Bay area. And how do we do that? You know, at first the cities did it. But you know how the cities and counties did it? They had their own departments. They didn't talk to each other, and they competed for every prospect. Now, let me tell you, if you're a company from New York that wants to move to Tampa Bay, you want to have it made easy for you. You want to come down here. You want to get shown all of the potential locations, all of the benefits, all the disadvantages, and you want to have a pretty good neutral presentation of that. And that was the birth of the Tampa Bay Partnership. A group of us who are regional business leaders in the community formed this group that might have been Pinellas-oriented or Hillsborough-oriented or Pasco-oriented, and we put it all together, and we said, stop arguing, work together and solve problems, and we'll get more businesses in our area, and it helps everybody, even when a good business comes to Pasco County. So that's what we did, okay? And I don't know if you remember, but we used to have a never-ending war between Hillsborough, Pasco, and Pinellas over water. They were argued about the rates. Those areas spent $12 million in legal fees fighting with each other. So the business leaders got on the phone, they called, and they said, look, this is nuts. Who cares whether we spend an extra quarter or a quarter of a cent or a half a cent a gallon? It really doesn't make any difference. What we got to do is we got to cooperate to make sure we have the supply of water that we need to grow this community and serve the needs of its populace. And this is ridiculous. So I want to assure you, we're going to spend a lot of money making sure you don't get elected next time if you don't solve the problem. That's known as leverage. So, you know, we solved the problem. And the water district, sure, they have debates once in a while, but let me tell you, it's a lot better now, and the cooperation is good. And we actually have to do it on a statewide basis, right? Because we get some of our water outside the state from Georgia, and we got to be cooperating with Georgia, Alabama, and Louisiana to make sure we got adequate water supplies and know where they're coming from. We've got to cooperate to make sure the road systems can get us around places without spending an hour to do a 15-minute drive to go to Harbor Island. Or, you know, it's a tough problem, and you got to work on it all the time. So what I would tell you, business leaders, they've got a vested interest in all this stuff. They really do. And if they can't make it easy for their employees to get from North Hillsborough to come to work in Pinellas, and from Pinellas to go to North Hillsborough, we got a problem. We don't have free mobility of our workforce being able to get around and go places to work. And if we don't have good school systems here that can train people in the skills we need for this community, I remember when we didn't have any nurses, and we were bringing them in from the Philippines, right? And we didn't have them. So what did Carl Cutler do? Created a nursing school almost overnight and started addressing the problem. So and if we don't have people that are doing things like that, we're just not going to get things done here. So the process, the people, they're far more important than whatever that issue is 50 years from now, because if you have people like that that are always engaged in your communities, they're going to find a way to solve the problems, and they're going to get it done. Sometimes it'll be painful. And, you know, a lot of us have to start worrying about global warming now, right? I mean, it's not a pretty picture that you can envision in 100 years if we don't do something about global warming. So, you know, and you don't see a whole lot getting done. You see books getting written and people talking in college, but you don't see action steps, and we need to see action steps now. So that's the next part. So, look, people who are smart in business are smart at dealing with these kinds of problems. They know how to manage problems. They know how to solve issues and make things happen. So they need to use those skills to help the civic leaders who work on their problems. They don't have all those resources that the businesses in the community have. So very important.
Who else has a question? Yes, in the back. You see? I'm finding this, I'm finally getting my answer about this relationship between the private and the public.
You're figuring it out, huh?
Yeah,
this is good. I like
this is revealing.
See, I'm
Okay, this is our last question.
I'm Lothar Juhl. Mr. James, have you already considered a name for your future art museum?
I've considered a lot of names for my future art museum. But you know, I'm committed. It's actually in my trust that if I'm not here, it still gets built to create another museum in the greater St. Petersburg area, hopefully downtown right in the center, where I'll take a good portion of my collection, the best works of art in wildlife and Western art. So it'll be a wildlife and Western art museum. Probably have those words in the title. But and then what have we got? I mean, if we can attract a lot of people here to see the Dalí, and we can attract, and people know, who like art, know they can come here, whether it's seeing a lot of art at different museums, or whether it's going to Duncan McClellan's and seeing glass being blown and made into beautiful glass art. It really,
and the Fine Arts Museum.
Oh yeah, it's one after another. That's what I mean. It's the Fine Arts Museum. It's the Shuli. It's all kinds of activities. We got the new Crafts Museum that they're talking about. I've met with the person that is doing that. If we can do that, we're going to have a host of new tourists coming here. We're going to have new hotels downtown to be able to handle the traffic, and we'll have great success here. And who would have ever guessed 25 years ago, when they shut down those green benches at 6 o'clock, that we'd have people all over downtown at night. On the weekends, you can hardly get around. There's so many people here, and have a lot of great restaurants to go visit, to enjoy and try. If I just didn't have another charitable event. I took a night off last night, and I actually went to the grill and had a great meal. So our restaurant owners that provide the food and beverages here for the Dalí, I tried to give a little back by going and visiting their restaurant. We had a great dinner. How did I get that dinner? I bought it as a charitable auction for all children's. So I was never going to use it. So what I do now is, when I buy it that night, I give it to my secretary, and I said, you got to get this. You got to get the people to come. You got to organize the night. This has all got to be organized as soon as we can get it done. Otherwise, I can't tell you how many dinners. Tom's dinners. I have 4 of Tom's dinners for 10 or 12 people that I have not used yet. Now, I go to his restaurants, okay, but I go with 2 people or 4 people, and I never got around to organizing it, and I'm feeling guilty about going and collecting a party because I didn't do it on a timely basis. So that's what happens.
Since I now feel guilty for not providing Mr. James with dinner, I am going to ask all of you to thank him for being here, since the museum is closing.
Thank you. I want to thank you for coming, and I know a lot of you already, and I know that you participate in activities, but for heaven's sakes, do it more. I mean, it's so important what you can contribute. And, you know, there are no people that I admire more than the people that I've had the great fortune to work with in this community who, well, I sort of admire Michael Bloomberg, too. He's given a few dollars to Johns Hopkins and to Harvard Business School, and, you know, he was a classmate of mine. And he's a very good manager and did a good job managing the city of New York. And he was a Democrat who ran as a Republican. So parties don't make any difference. This is about solving problems and doing the right thing for people. So that I would tell you, all of you should make sure you spend some time doing that to the best of your ability. And that makes life a lot more worthwhile. Thanks for coming. I appreciate it.
Please come back next